Tendency to try to dominate
So that's the guest. That's not Robert.
Middle East and let China kind of step in and to help take care of things. That would be another pathway for.
Well, so he's not doesn't sound that confident. But then just listen to Robert. Robert steps in here and.
For it, I think.
I say turn over the Middle East to China, and I'm not kidding. I mean, because their whole foreign policy is less ideologically driven than ours.
Right.
And they are very pro-stability. And what would you say the Middle East is lacking among other things? Stability.
If Robert Wright had to put, I don't know, his life savings on the line to say, like, things will be better, there will be less brinkmanship if China controls the Middle East or oversees the Middle East, like, would he actually feel confident? It's like, yeah, I'll double my savings because I'll be right. Things will be better. You know, enough people we'll find enough people to agree who'll say things will be better. Whatever, 80% of the people of the relevant parties would say, yes, China did a better job. China does it for like a decade, and then there's some kind of an assembly, and like there's votes, and now that the US stayed out and China kind of leaned in, everyone's happier in the Middle East now. There's less brinkmanship, and, you know, jihad rates have plummeted because China's overseeing the Middle East. Yeah, I don't fucking think so, Robert. I don't think you'd actually put your life savings on the line. But you propose it in one such way as if you would. That's why you suck, Robert.
And
But then, of course, there's the other people who would just say that it's guaranteed that China would just make everything worse. Much worse. Much worse. Because those would be the pro-blob people. I'm not among the pro-blob people. I'm among the let's do a lot of hedging when we're doing foreign affairs commentary. But, you know.
And, you know.
I'm a dying breed.
They don't have a dog in this fight.
Not that I was, you know, my type was ever dominant in this. One of the reasons, you know, it's just a shit show, and people can't talk to each other because they're all trained into thinking that they've got to have these strong views, and usually these strong views correspond to their patriotism levels. Not in the case of Robert, but in the case of a lot of other people. I'm not biased, I'm just a patriot, but I can, you know, judge my country's, you know, participation in the world the way any other person can judge. You know, I can be unbiased. Like, no, if you're a patriot, you're like the person who shows up to whatever your kid's soccer practice or soccer games or something, and your kid does the foul, and you didn't think it was a foul, and so you bitch at the ref, right? You bitch at the ref. No, my kid didn't tackle. Like, no, your kid did do the foul, but because you love your kid, you're gonna simp for your kid. Ew. You're gonna simp for your kid. You're gonna fail to see how your kid did do the foul. And I would say the same thing to the stupid patriots. You can't be unbiased. You're advertising your bias by being a patriot. You're just advertising it to the world, but you think you can keep all this under control. No, you can't. It's so bad, even non-patriots like Robert Wright can't grapple.
Driven in ours.
Help take care of things. That would be another pathway forward, I think.
I say turn over the Middle East to China. And
if you had to say, if your nuts were on the line as to whether that was actually, you know, a clear-cut good move, you know, I'd say it's no. If I had to choose, like, gun to my head, I'd choose the blob over China. But, you know, there's a lot of things I don't know about China, and there's a lot of things I don't know about the blob. But, Robert, you'd have to think you know everything about both these operations, these countries with their spheres of influence, and how they interact and how they figure into the Middle East. You'd have to think you know enough to sign off on this advice. Why do you think you know this, Robert?
I'm not kidding. I mean, because they...
You should be kidding. But anyway, I like how I somehow spiraled into the Patriots. They made it all about the stupid Patriots. If you're a Patriot, you can't be unbiased, right? You're always gonna... Because you love the country. You love one country. Maybe you love multiple countries. Maybe you're a dual patriot. But you're likely going to love one country far more than any other. Because you're really just a nativist. Most patriots are just nativists. But maybe they're soft nativists. And so you're going to think that you can measure this. You think you can be fair cop as a patriot. No, you can't. Just like, you know, the parent at the soccer practice or wherever else. You know, Timmy didn't do the foul. Timmy's my son. The ref's out to get Timmy. Yeah, you're going to think the ref's out to get your country. Kind of like all the Jews think now. The ref's out to get Israel. The ref's against Israel. It's like all the Palestinian people say, oh, the ref's against us. The ref's against us. Our state. It's not a state, it was a mandate. So yeah, no one should be a patriot, and Robert Wright sucks. And Robert Wright needs to hedge a lot more.
But I think in general, he,
It's about Biden.
he just seems weirdly
He's talking about Biden.
conflict averse for a guy who's so deeply involved in 2 wars.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think that the Biden White House was stung by the reaction to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, because his poll numbers took a nosedive from which they haven't recovered fully.
Right. And that was the blob at work.
Yeah.
There we go.
It was bungled. And there were a lot of stupid things about it, beginning with saying, we'll do it on 9/11.
They did it. They did it on... Yeah, that's when it ended. What are you talking about, Bob? What are you talking about?
Announcing in advance, here's the day, an obvious political contrivance to make it that day. It was not handled well, but any sober assessment would have said,
I just remember, for some reason, I remember August, and I'm like, well, I guess I was wrong, because Bob's saying it was 9/11, but then there's no way this random search is wrong. Yeah, they freaking did it in the summer. Well, September 11th is still summer, but anyway, I just want to not do anymore, but they're getting the little things wrong, and it's like, I gotta pile onto it, because they're getting the little things
right at that moment after it happened. Well,
and I can't even speed them up.
it could have been a lot worse. Could have been a long civil war that leads to Taliban control over a year and kills 50,000 people in the meanwhile. But as it was, the Taliban just negotiated their way to control of all of these cities, and they passed hands without anybody dying. But what
if the U.S. had never even gone in after 9/11? I mean, that's the counterfactual, whereas I just don't see good things. And Bob seems to think that he sees better things, and I just don't know how you can think that when you see what so many of them believe. It's just never been a good... You can say positive things about the blob in some cases, right? South Korea versus North Korea, you wouldn't just flip a coin. I like to do these. South Korea versus North Korea, you wouldn't just flip a coin. You choose South Korea. The U.S. oversaw a lot of that. So, Bob, you got to talk about the North Korea-South Korea distinction every now and then if you're going to talk about the kind of fucked up withdrawal that happened in August, not on September 11th. But you won't. Man, look at it go.
Say about this New York Times story?
I think, first of all, according to my clock, I should say it in overtime. I do want to talk more about this, but we should bring the public part of the podcast to a close.
Of course.
Encourage people to become members of the Non-Zero newsletter.
So that I can discourage it, because there's nothing you'll get from it. You'll just get a bunch of overconfident prognoses.
And then you'll have
a lot of just stammering.
Have access to this and all such overtimes on your podcast feed.
People who are paid to talk should be a little more self-conscious, or a lot more self-conscious about just how much they stammer. And part of it is there's just too much, too frequently. You bombard people with content. My videos are long, but at least they're rare. But if you're long and non-rare, you're in trouble. And you want half of it to be paid for. And
what else are we going to talk about in overtime? I do have things, because I taped, I was on the Russians with Attitude podcast. I taped it yesterday.
That's the other thing. He traffics in a lot of, let's just say, non-credible folk, and he just portrays them as credible. Like folks who are worse than him, but, I guess, that's what we're supposed to think of as, kind of epistemic adventurism. But in some cases with those, it's too much even for me. Like, I'm the guy who said, like, you just see some rando, you don't know anything about him, he's not representing a institution, it's just a rando who denies something about the Holocaust. Like, I'm gonna first hear him out, I'm not gonna be judgmental, right? So like, I don't have these hoity-toity standards, but even I know, like, that those guys are fucked out of their minds.
And we talked about this with them. And they're going to be on my podcast.
Of course.
before long.
And I think I'll
Anti-blob orgy there, Robert.
mention at least one diplomat who thinks
Russians with attitude. Yeah, just more of that, the patriot brain worms. They have patriot brain worms, Robert, and you can't see it. Or, you kind of think that, you got to get their perspective. He thinks we got to get everyone's perspective. What does he call it? Cognitive empathy. You got to get everyone's perspective. But in many cases, the more I hear, the more clarifying it is that no, they're not the ones who can. Their perspective ought not be respected. In some cases, right? So you're first curious about the reasons, and then the reasons don't do anything good for you. You just see the reasons are all just garbage. It's brainworms.
AI.
Of course.
We've got a paper that came out saying hallucination is inevitable.
Mhm.
And Elon Musk is suing OpenAI. I want to talk about that.
Of course he is. He's got a gajillion and one things in his brain, busy businessman kind of things or personal things. But then the problem is he also thinks he can be informed politically. Whereas it's just so clear. His political commentary is just so bad. Some of the worst I've seen in terms of the, heavy hitters. He's got that just the barest of the bare surface level, and it's just so clear. It's not because he's stupid, because he's very busy. So he just does this as a kind of drive-by thing. But then, millions upon millions, tens of millions, eat right out of his hand. It's like, you guys, you're eating out of the hand of a person who's very busy, either suing people or running all kinds of businesses. It's like, if I were that busy, I wouldn't dare be a commentator, because clearly I'm too busy to actually do the deep dives. But he's all confident, but it's all just narratives. And of all the criticisms Robert has of him, I've never heard Robert goes like, yeah, maybe that guy's just too busy to be a commentator to begin with. But all these people, they haven't even figured out yet that busyness is an anathema for insight, especially in a world as chaotic as this, where like so many things happen every day. But they don't even discourage like busy people from taking these deep dives or pretending that they're doing these deep dives. They're too stupid to figure that out. Like, that's his fucking problem. And he's also a hack on top of that too. So he's like doubly bad in Musk's case. He's a busy hack.
And Steve Call's got a new book about kind of how we got into the Iraq War and our misassessment of Saddam Hussein.
Of course.
And maybe we'll get into some other things. But again...
God, I've never wanted to be able to speed up a thing more in my life.
Especially if you just kind of support the cause.
Oh, the cause. He's a causey person. Another causey.
What is our cause, Andrew? Do you remember what our cause is?
Boo blob, boo blob. And maybe every now and then, the Islamists are bad too, but mainly boo the blob.
We've had a lot of causes that we're now unifying under the cause
There's
of
a grand unifying
non-zero.
theme behind all our causes.
Right.
Apocalypse aversion, cognitive empathy.
Right, apocalypse aversion because you fear lifelessness, Bob. Why do you fear lifelessness as a Buddhist? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing the collective FOMO thing, Bob?
Which is
anti-tribalism.
People's perspective. Anti-tribalism. Handling AI.
Best path to anti-tribalism is be more asocial. Not saying you got to be asocial from A to Z, but be more asocial. Bob hasn't figured that out as a Buddhist. He's one of these people. It's like, we're social beings. He says it that way. We're social beings. So it's like, no, when you say we're social beings, you use a condemnatory tone. You don't say it in this kind of, oh, we're just social beings. It's okay. No, it's not fucking okay. It's driving the tribalism, Bob. You haven't figured that out yet. Or you have, but you're too much of a puss to talk straight on it. It's like, yeah, it's the people who are too weak to be asocial, too psychologically infirm to be asocial, who are the zealots and the tribalists. But you can't figure that out, Bob, as a Buddhist and as a kind of, he wrote his Buddhism book in 1995. That's how long he's been doing this. I think he's one of these people who's been doing this, speaking in public thing for so long, they can't even figure out. He's just on autopilot. What a shame.
Wisely, it's all one thing, folks.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't find it.
I just want to know who actually doesn't get enough from all their kind of free, I'm going to show 10 more episodes, from all their free... Hang on. Maybe I'll kill this current one, but no, I won't. You see how freaking... This is some top-notch frequency, and these are all long. So who actually thinks, though, I just don't get enough Robert Wright insights from the free ones? They're like half of him. It's all like available halfway, and then the other half is... But like, who goes like, oh, it's just not enough insight. I need more. I need to pay for the full ones. Like, why? Look how much. Like, I could never listen to it. I wouldn't listen to anything else. Just the free versions. It's kind of the case with Sam too. If I listen to all their free stuff, like, it's not just that I wouldn't have time to listen to their paid stuff, to listen to the stuff that's behind the vault. It's like I wouldn't have time to listen to anything else, and I sure as hell wouldn't have time to do these videos and edit them. And I guess the worst sin is there's no playfulness with the titles. Every single title is like, what you see, what you get. It's nothing, no double entendres or anything like that. Dual meanings, forget about it. It's just, we're here to advertise exactly what the thing is about, so that the viewers can know exactly what they're getting into based on the title. And forget the titles being artful and kind of just snappy in terms of, not even wordplay, but there's just certain words that align well for a title of a thing. And then there's, parentheses. Okay, so Robin Hanson. I haven't listened to Robin Hanson in a while, so maybe I'll click this one. But ew, AI, ew, bad subject. Wasted so much of my freaking 2010s thinking that if I just read enough on AI, I'll be able to grasp AI. No. If I grasped AI, then I just go into, robotics. I'd kind of work in the robotics field for like a year or two and then make enough to retire. But anyway, yeah, look at all these titles. There's nothing ironic about these titles. And, that's why it appeals to, or it strives to appeal to, the masses. Everything's got to be rendered acceptable for that kind of mass comprehensibility. That's how people do their online commentary. Just render everything, just dull everything down to the point where it meets that criteria of dull mass comprehensibility. And you see it in the titles. No wordplay, no nothing. Repugnant. But I guess it's just me who thinks so. No one else really cares about that stuff. Right? Where are all the artful people who still aren't just artful, who understand, like, we should discuss current events, we should discuss, maybe philosophy and stuff like that, but we should do so artfully and not just, it's comprehensible, so at least it's comprehensible. No, you got to make content that appeals to the people who see the universal in the particular. And sure, you'll get a lot less hits, but at least then you'll have a decent crowd. But no, Robert wants to be Causey and save the world by booing the blob. How fucking stupid is that? Very stupid. And he's a Buddhist. Escaping death. I'm too early in the podcast now to really know whether he thinks he can escape death, but here's an interesting...
I'm probably at the look...
because I did the whole boundless gender wool, and then, I gotta wait till I upload it because there's all these other videos, but I did the whole boundless gender wool where I'm saying matters of combat, it's important. But maybe I shouldn't have been so narrow as to confine it to the social conservative psyche. Maybe it's broader than that, because look, I rant about things and then I come up with the evidence. Other people supply me with the evidence. Listen to this guy. What's the guess? Sebastian Younger. Never heard of this guy, but he kind of bolsters what I say here about matters of combat, but he puts it in more fancy terms.
And of risk-taking and the sort of aggregate of dangerous experiences. So just to be clear, like, I look like a risk taker to the general population, but not to my population.
Right.
So I grew up in a very safe, pretty affluent Boston suburb in the 60s and 70s. And, I had the sense, I don't know why, but I had the sense that as a, teenager, that if I wasn't somehow tested in some sort of mortal way, that I would never mature into a man.
Yeah, that's the kind of remnants of Spartan practice. The Spartans kind of feared that, and then they started practicing that as very young kids. And, you're kind of feeling the remnants of that. But maybe you don't descend from the Spartans, so ignore that I said this.
I would just stay forever sort of juvenile. And I knew that in this suburb, nothing was ever going to, nothing was really ever going to test me.
Yeah, you're a stranger in your homeland, just like I said in my own based way.
No volcanoes, there were no hurricanes,
there were no gangs.
Bulls were going to come driving down the street and pick up trucks. There would be no way to sort of prove my worth to society, which
To be serviceable and less disposable. I get you.
throughout history, young men have felt compelled to do, and the society needed them to do that. And I don't know why I was aware of this, but I was. And, eventually my father was...
Well, did they feel compelled to do it because society needed them to do that? Was that the crux of it? Or did they feel compelled to do that because they wanted poon? I think they felt, they knew that poon's more impressed with you if you can beat the other guy with them sook bones. That's what poon wanted, and man wants poon. And, many a man is willing to go the next level to get poon. And so maybe you just went next level to get poon, even though you didn't realize. You didn't realize what was at the bottom of it. You went next level to get poon. I wrote a whole book. Sammy read his whole book. Of course, Sam. This is one of the reasons Sam's brain is kind of zombie-ish. Because Sam has to host all these people. He has to get these accredited guests who are always usually pimping books. And so he reads a lot of books. But the more books if you really got to read that many books, you kind of lose touch with your own mind. And you come across like a zombie to someone like me, who's, for the most part, stopped reading books. Because just being in my own head is just so much better. But Sam's got a podcast, and so he's got to host a bunch of people, and he's got to read their books. And he's always so impressed with their books. But this guy wrote a book, and he doesn't seem to get it. You needed to test yourself because you wanted poon.
Refugee from two wars. Before were sort of juvenile. And I knew that in this suburb, nothing was really ever going to test me. There were no volcanoes, there were no hurricanes, no rebels were going to come driving down the street and pick up trucks. There would be no way to sort of prove my worth to society, which throughout history,
as a man,
young men have felt compelled to do, and the society needed them.
Well, I have to title this video Kantian Signalling, but I don't really discuss Kant. I might discuss a bit of Kant in this kind of prelude to the video audio, but I don't know. Truth is, I've only read something like 90% of my knowledge of Kant is secondhand. But nonetheless, I want to title the video Kantian Signalling because the value of honesty comes up often. Very shortly now, I will launch into the audio where I talk about Evo-Psych, or its full name, evolutionary psychology. But everyone listening to this should know Evo-Psych means evolutionary psychology. Sorry for the chirps. It's even earlier now, as opposed to yesterday when I recorded the audios that will come up next. But I just have to cover my bases with a few things. So one of them is, by Evo-Psych, I mean evolutionary psychology, not what the street commentators talk about. That's the bogus stuff, but it's still kind of under the evolutionary psychology canon. Or maybe that's my distorted view because the street commentators are all over the internet, whereas the pros are few and far between. And the pros are kind of more boring because it's all these dense papers that are kind of hard to finish, but that are nonetheless informative in terms of kind of the most up-to-date evolutionary psychology. The field grows and expands with time, and it dispenses with its inaccuracies, more or less. Probably better than any other social science. So I am very interested in evolutionary psychology. I kind of wrestle with these upcoming audios in terms of, well, just what percent of it do I think is bogus? It's hard. I say more than half, I say less than half, because I come up with these reasons as to why it might actually be. My initial skepticism of evolutionary psychology may have actually been more correct than I ended up thinking as the kind of 2020s rolled on. What was the example I used? In terms of humor specifically, the way Evo-Psych diagnoses the actual core motive as to why somebody would even want to go around and make jokes. And so I didn't really hang on the example that's kind of a good rebuke, but think about it. A bunch of guys on an island, they're hetero, and they still make jokes, and they were kind of born and raised alongside other men. Like the moment their mother birthed them, the moment they were begotten, they were separated, and they were raised on a remote island by a bunch of guys. So it's like a guy-only society, and they're hetero, and nonetheless, they're very jolly and kind of, it's a humor island. Everyone has a positive attitude toward comedy, and the worst kind of comedy. I say mean-spirited. I say it's good to be mean-spirited. That was a wrong choice of words in the upcoming audio. It's just good to actually keep people on their toes. If nothing else works, ridicule is very much welcome. But, think about it. Like, how does the evolutionary psychologist make sense of that hypothetical, or I'm sure there's been an experiment where like you just have men with minimal to no exposure to women, and nonetheless they're still motivated. They're hetero. They're still motivated to be funny. Is that a strike against Evo-Psych? I think it's a fair question. And then the other thing, there was a kind of tangent that I kind of want to say a bit more about now. I tangented into this thing about how overpopulation, the actual pushback to overpopulation, what gets called overpopulation, most of it, all of it, is about this resource management. But I started thinking about, quality control. And so a world with 8 billion plus people, obviously people are going to find their niche, and monomaniacal people especially are going to find their niche. And so in any domain, I guess this is called hyper specialization, right? I think there's a strong correlation between the number of people that exist in any given society and the extent to which this hyper specialization thing is going to keep being, like the hyper is going to keep being hyperized, if I may invent a word. And it has to do with quality control. The more people you have, you're going to have the worst possible cases in terms of just absolute train wrecks of human beings. But you're also going to have these, stellar, gifted people, the more people you have. And so I really think the reason, anytime you hear someone try to raise alarms about overpopulation, always being about the resource management, and never really being about, the talent pool management, is because it's inevitable that people will either interpret into the complainer there being sour grapes on their part, and no one wants to make arguments where it's like it's inevitable that your own sour grapes will be showing if you make the kind of argument. So now I'm just going to kind of fess all cards on the table. Yes, my argument, it's in part motivated by my own sour grapes. And why? When I think like the problem with overpopulation, it's, whatever, the resource concern thing, that's very arguable. What's not arguable is that, there's like a lot of people who were just on the cusp of maybe not reaching specialization, but in these other things that are less formal, like stand-up comedy, for example. Like there's people who are just on the cusp of it, but because the number of candidates for something was just that much larger, because there were just that many more people that existed, right? Well, they didn't even think to bother to try because they just saw that like this is just the competition. It doesn't just have to be stand-up comedy. It can just even be just attempts to be a demagogue or something, right? Like there's a lot of demagogues who, like the quality of demagoguery seems to be rising simply because the number of people, like what else could it be other than the fact that like the best of the best are just that much better when there's a wider crop of demagogic candidates and stand-up comedy people in the making, candidates and so on and so forth. And so it's like there's people who are just like they're just at the cusp of it, but they don't make the cut because there's just too much competition because of the number of people that exist, right? And so the reason the sour grapes things becomes clear, it's like there's far more people who enjoy stand-up comedy but never think like maybe I can do stand-up comedy. And so it's to their benefit, like to have that many more people apply to be or try to be stand-up comedians, because then they can just enjoy a higher standard of stand-up comedy. But if you're like me, you maybe enjoy stand-up comedy as a kid, but then in the back of your mind, you're like, might I be able to do this? But you never try because you kind of, you're a little too ADD, you have concentration issues sometimes. But like every single stand-up comedy pro who makes it seems like they never have those kinds of issues, but that's only because there's truly that many people. See, I think if like you watch back like really old 60s, 70s, early 70s stand-up people like who weren't famous, like they absolutely do get tangled up in something they were trying to say, and they just start over, and like the audience doesn't like walk away because the field, can I call stand-up comedy a field? It was still very young. It was in its infancy. And the crop of people who were kind of applying to be it were much smaller. the standards rose. And yes, so the standards rose with the number of people. And I guess to the average kind of consumer of stand-up comedy who never thinks about actually trying to do it themselves, well, it's all to their benefit. But it's sour grapes for those kind of gray area people who, on the one hand, we want to enjoy a higher caliber of stand-up comedy and delivery, and you kind of do get taken out of it if the stand-up comedian is just kind of suddenly confused or doesn't know how to segue from one thing to the other because they kind of get innovative mid-act because their brain is just that impulsive, right? That, all those types, which has a certain other kind of charm to it, but it's like the audience would just be too weirded out by it. And so that's not where the industry, the stand-up comedy industry went. But it could have just as easily gone there if the population hadn't skyrocketed decade after decade. And that same kind of, the number of candidates applying, the number of competitors trying to outdo each other had just stayed in that same kind of zone that it was in the 60s, 70s. I guess stand-up comedy is something like stand-up comedy existed well before the 60s and 70s, but the kind of thing that we think of now as stand-up comedy. It's like there were less people trying to become it, and therefore, there was more quirkiness. There's not much quirkiness in the stand-up comedy performer nowadays because everyone just understands that the audience wouldn't tolerate it. The audience wouldn't tolerate too many weird segues that end up going nowhere because it's like you got to be able to concentrate well. And there's a lot of things like that. And yeah, sure, it's sour grapes on my part. But I think that, you probably, those people who are always just on the cusp of something, certainly in terms of athletes, like it's no wonder. Like the athletes now are like next level compared to what they were. Like even in the 80s, like you watch 80s NBA and you watch the NBA today and it's like, well, like what else is there? Maybe steroids, not in the NBA, but in like football. But, it's just because the population count keeps rising, and so you're going to have the best of the best make their way into all these specialized fields. And so there's probably even more people who are just on the cusp who don't make it. And so I think that's an interesting observation and an interesting kind of rebuke to the people who want to say there's nothing wrong with overpopulation because they're always thinking about these people complaining about the resource aspect. Whatever, the resource aspect, I don't know enough about all this stuff. But I do know enough about my being on the cusp of various things that I'll just flash the freaking record. These guys are freaks record. Yeah, that's in the context of athletics. I really think if population had stabilized around like 2 billion, it wouldn't seem so unbelievably difficult to make it into the pros. The reason the pros are next level difficult is because there's 8 billion fucking people around. I've made my point, and now I'm going to launch back into the rant from yesterday about Evo-Psych. Continuing the tangent a couple of minutes in about this very thing that I just went over now. But I just want to kind of flesh it out more, and thus you got these introductory audio right now. Man, look at it go. Way too chirpy for 4:17 in the morning. This is an audio where I'm going to talk about Evo-Psych. Well, I'm not really going to talk about Evo-Psych. I'm going to talk about why I hated Evo-Psych. Up until about, 7-8 years ago, I really hated Evo-Psych. I didn't just think it was bogus, like all of it. I hated it. I guess I still think something like half of it is bogus. Well, less than half. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about the contents of Evo-Psych. I'm going to talk about how, psychologically, what was my aversion to it on arrival. It was in part reduction. It's seeming reductionism. But then specifically, Evo-Psych would tell me that the reason I was a class clown, I wasn't always a class clown, but in these classes where I had like at least one friend, so grade 10 and before, like grade 11 onward, I had like no friends. They put me in a bunch of classes where like none of my friends, my few friends, were in, because when we were in classes together, we were impossible. And one of the ways I was impossible is I was a co-class clown with one of my friends in any class where I would be with them before they divided us up. Well, mostly me. They didn't divide the rest of them up. They just divided me up in the last 2 years of high school. But we were these co-class clowns. And so I always thought the motivation for me being a class clown, not a successful one, by the way, maybe like, I don't know, 2 out of 3 times, whatever I said got a laugh, and then the other third would just bomb, something like that. But like Evo-Psych would explain my motivation to be a class clown in ways that I didn't feel that it would, you know, I didn't identify with what Evo-Psych would tell me I ought to identify with as my motive for being a class clown. I thought it was just my kind of inherent character that sought to make light of things, and especially in a mean-spirited way, just because I think that's good. It's good to be mean-spirited, and it's good to find comedy in places where you're really not supposed to be comedic, like a classroom. But Evo-Psych comes along and says, no, you and everyone else, everyone who gets into especially stand-up and all this kind of stuff that I'm only now late in life realizing I should have tried to do. Way late, this realization that I was like, I could have made a go of it at stand-up comedy. I guess it's not too late. It's just there's too much competition. See, this is why, you know, it doesn't even have to be like the population bomb, like that book, The Population Bomb, proven to be false, and the Malthusians proven to be false. Like, that's not the problem with overpopulation. It's not about resources. It's about the standards being way too fucking high. Like, the more people you have, the more people who get into stuff like stand-up comedy are going to be better than you. Whereas if there were a lot less people in the world, maybe I could have made the cut in terms of stand-up comedy and even thought to bother to try because the standards weren't too, you know, like you can kind of just get tangled up in the middle of doing your bit with a crowd watching you, and like, you know, it wouldn't be a big deal because there wouldn't be these stellar ones who never get like tangled up and, you know, forget their lines or whatever mid-act. But because the world has that many people, right, the standards for who is an official stand-up comedian are really that, you know, next level demanding, where it's like you fuck up once, forget about it. Because there's enough other ones who won't fuck up even once. But anyway, I tangented. Evo-Psych came along and said, you're a class clown. It didn't say it to me, but this is how I decoded it when I first started reading Evo-Psych. The only reason you were a class clown is because you wanted to get laid. And that just doesn't seem like something that I would identify with. But of course, Evo-Psych would say, of course you don't identify with it. It's the deep subconscious that's motivating it. It's not some kind of narrative that you're telling yourself about yourself. You got to poke and prod at those deeper motivations. You were a class clown because you just wanted to get laid. And I'm like, well, hypothetical Evo-Psych professor who I'm having a argument with in my own head, imaginary debates with in my own head, how would you even know that I went to a co-ed high school? Like, what if I went to an all-boys school? Would that have meant that I must have been gay had I been a class clown in an all-boys school, right? Does anyone think that, like, if a bunch of men were on an island alone and they were all heterosexual, that therefore there couldn't have been humor that exists on that island, or they would gradually just turn gay, right? An interesting question, actually. I didn't think this would be a part of this audio when I started recording it. But anyway, yeah, that was the kind of the exchange I had every time I would have these kind of pretend debates in my own head, me versus the evolutionary psychology professor. And it was through those kind of pretend, hypothetical, imaginary debates that I finally gradually realized that, maybe that figment of my imagination has a point. Because even if I do throw out that kind of curveball, it's like, well, how do you know I didn't go to an all-boys high school? Then you can just say, well, did you? And I'm like, oh, no, I didn't. And so I lose a debate in my own head, once again, because I can't lie to the figment of my own imagination, because that would be dishonest, and dishonesty is, well, not always, but almost always bad. You know, give or take those life or death scenarios, calamity scenarios. You're dishonest to the bad person, and then the bad person doesn't do the bad thing, and so it's good. But save for those scenarios, well, yeah, dishonesty is always bad. But see, the Evo-Psych professor that I used to debate with in my own head would just say then, well, you know, you don't really think dishonesty is that bad. You just want to convince the world. You just want to signal to the world that you think it's that bad so that they find you more trustworthy, but you've got something else up your sleeve. The reason you want them to think you trustworthy is you want to take advantage of them in some way. So it doesn't matter what kind of virtue, whether it's, I want to be the class clown because I'm based, or I want to be honest because honesty is good. Like, Evo-Psych will always tell you that there's something else to the story. And, maybe actually right now I'm convincing myself through this audio that maybe there is more than half that's wrong with Evo-Psych. Maybe more than half of it is iffy. But these things are really hard to definitively prove and disprove. All I'm going to say is, I self-identify as someone who really thinks honesty is good for its own sake. But how can I be sure that that's actually the whole story and that there's nothing else in the deeper subconscious that would prove that Evo-Psych professor right? Hard to know. But anyway, this was a fun audio, but sorry about the tangents. But do I even need to apologize about the tangents anymore? No, I don't. I'll be proud of the tangents, because no one tangents like me. And there we go. That's something that Evo-Psych can actually be compatible with. Like, I'm egotistical about my tangents, and I think whatever reason I have for that, Evo-Psych would say that is the pure reason. But these other things, no, Evo-Psych would tell me that I'm fooling myself. But let's put it to the audience. What percent of Evo-Psych, as far as you're familiar with it, what percent of it do you think is onto something versus bogus? I don't know. Early on, I said it's half, then I said it's less than half, and then I said it's more than half in terms of bogus. But I'm going to kind of return to saying it's probably less than half. Maybe I'll do a video on Evo-Psych, like a proper video at some point, and this may be the teaser for it. So to touch up on this, I'm on about the nativists now.
For having this, failing to see that it's luck of the draw and not God steering things as to why they're Americans.
Yeah, but one might say that, like, to steelman the nativist case then, which I didn't do here, but to steelman it, it's like, well, you're neither responsible for what country you're born in, to the same extent as you're not responsible for your whatever attributes, qualities, the ways in which society says you are merited or demerited. And so it's like you wouldn't try to devise a society that doesn't take that into account. So then why can't, the kind of the giftedness of being born to the most prosperous, safe, enlightened nations, why can't that also be a kind of thing that you can take pride in, or at least preserve as a kind of cultural flex, the way you can preserve whatever other personal attribute that's non-nationalistic or non, kind of ethno-nationalistic, right? So that's the kind of one way. It's like if we gotta build a society that preserves our right to, flex and posture, or at least for it to let it be known that we have whatever positive attributes. Like one of the positive attributes can be nationhood. So that's why an American can feel proud of being an American. It's like, okay, you go ahead and be proud. I'm just gonna at most say I'm glad to be Canadian, or whatever else, wherever else I might have lived. I can say I'm glad. I'm not proud. I'm just a glad Canadian. And if you're a proud American, you're biased. But I can see how you would try to connect it to other kind of personal attributes. Like nationhood is just another kind of personal attributes that we can't, in that deep responsibility sense, at least if we believe in strict causality as we ought, we can't take pride in ourselves on any kind of basis. So it's like, yeah, I'd rather bite that bullet than bite the let's be proud of our nationhood bullet. Yeah, if I got to go that far, I will. I'll give up certain kinds of, practical deeds and misdeeds for practical living. Like, there's no way to live an egoless life. There's no way to live an egoless life. I think most of the people who have experienced it, say for those kind of craziest of the crazy in the Deep East, but all these Westerners, like Terence McKenna, who's like, I'm egoless. Well, you didn't stay egoless. So you can be temporarily egoless, but it's like, no. We need to have a society that just accepts that we're all going to have to find our ways to feel pride and shame in whatever ways. In other words, to exercise our egos. But let's say, I think
at once critiquing them, but I'm being zigzaggy, and I'm saying, like, if you look at the Palestinian levels of kind of third world crappers, what do I call them in a track? Like, you almost kind of feel a touch of sympathy with the natives for, you know, these people are in the third world. They took the steps to emigrate. Clearly, they're not born in the West. Clearly, their English is clearly like a third or fourth language. So they kind of took steps to emigrate and then to stay in the West. And yet they really do seem to hate most of what the West is about. Most. Notably the West's kind of sympathy to.
I catch it later, but yeah, I did say they hate us, they hate the West. It was like, I shouldn't have used the word hate. I catch it later, but you know, I kind of want to point out that I feel really bad about that. No, they don't have to hate it. It's about just not getting certain things right. And that is just not getting the, like, jihadists have too much power. They're the engine of the movement, and truly rabid Islamists. It's not as simple. It's not as simple as what happened in the 40s. Gotta let go of the group identity, folks. You leaning in, whether you're performative or not, you're leaning in.
Israel, instead of all this kind of third-worldist projects.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, you know, off the wall levels of entitlement. So I am, in at least one sense, tad sympathetic to nativism, but I still don't think they're justified in having this kind of thinking that it's not just luck of the draw that they're Americans. And so in that strict sense, just as I don't think we have to pay, you know, cops any kind of homage or...
Oh, that was the other thing.
Any kind of homage
I delved into the cop thing, and I knew I had 2 points to make here. So sorry for playing so much of the stuff, but you can absolutely be grateful to the individual cop who saves your life. God, I wish I had made that point here. Individual cop, just as an individual, if he saves your life, great. You don't have to have now undergone a 180. Like, suppose you were one of these Bay Area cop schemers. There's these, you know, cop schemers, Bay Area transparency. You know, they don't have positive views of the cops in general. And like, but say a cop saves that guy's life. He makes his YouTube living agitating cops and truly showing cops at their worst. But imagine a cop like saves that guy's life. Bay Area transparency. I don't know. He might be dead by the time I upload this, because like it's one of those guys, like, you wake up, like how he eggs cops on and how he agitates them. This is a man with balls, right? So, you know, Bay Area transparency might be dead by the time this is uploaded. But you know, if a cop actually does save his life, he can be grateful to that single cop. He doesn't have to undergo a 180 and become enlightened and stop being a cop basher or a cop skeptic simply because that thing happened. But he can nonetheless feel grateful to that individual, because we're moral individualists first and foremost, or at least we're supposed to be. It's where a lot of the political individual rights thing get their force from the kind of moral individualism force. He can be grateful to an individual cop who hypothetically saves his life. Even a guy like Bay Area Transparency, who I hope doesn't die, but man, the way he ex-cops on. Like the ultimate, and there's these other ones who, you know, they surveil the cops. They flip the tables, but they gamble with their lives and certainly with their welfare. So a lot of the cops in the U.S. are freaking, they're wound up. He is still alive. Bay Area Transparency is still very much alive and kicking. Last upload 18 hours ago. On the whole, I like what he does. I like what a lot of them do. It's not that there's no one who, you know, has an irrational hatred of the cops, but they don't racialize it. So that's one reason I like what they do. They just turn the tables and, you know, how does it feel now? How does it feel to be surveilled? And I guess the majority of the cops, in terms of the videos I've seen, I guess I haven't seen any of his stuff in a long time, but in terms of the videos I've seen, most cops have a very bad reaction. They just haven't habituated themselves to the idea that it's absolutely ordinary citizens' right to record them and to just loiter in public areas. So they don't know the law. Cops often mistake policy for law. They think they're policy enforcement, and these guys expose them better than anyone. And plus here, you watch these videos. I was gonna play some clips, but this video is too stuffed, so I won't play the clips. But I think you can get the sense of what kind of people are the people who always take the cop's side, even when no one's breaking a law. it's these kind of, we don't know why you're here. No one needs to tell you why they're here. You're gonna end up in jail. It's just all these dull gravity people. It's not just the cops. Tell us why you're here or leave. No, they don't have to do any of that shit. And a good cop is a cop who takes the side of the person who recognizes that it's not against the law for him to just loiter and not leave. There's a difference between stupid policies and actual laws. And some cops don't know that. Just like some cops can't get used to the idea that you have a right to record them. Some cops, tragically many in the States, are confused in terms of what their job is. Their job is not policy enforcement. Their job is law enforcement. But yeah, just a lot of there's just these excessively fearful, paranoid people in the States. And I just, from a psychological standpoint, you can write whole psychology papers on this channel and what this guy does. Not because the joke's on him, it's because the joke's on all the people who are just so easily rattled when they see someone out in public not doing anything. It seems suspicious to them. You can just tell. I'm going to pretend physiognomy is true now. You could just tell based on this guy's face. He's got wacky notions in his head about what people are entitled and not entitled to do. But yeah, I like Bay Area transparency. I'm not going to play any of the clips, but you all should check out this channel so that what I said in the last clip can make a hell of a lot more sense. Yeah, you can just tell based on some of these titles. The police told me not to speak to you. Ooh. This is a huge element of freedom versus control that, America is not better. Like, per capita, per citizen, Americans are not better. They don't think better in terms of freedom when it comes to deference to cops. Maybe they think better than Europe on a host of other issues, but not when it comes to deference to cops. He needs to stop recording right now. No, the fuck he doesn't. He specifically selects spot. He knows his laws, Bay Area transparency. That's another reason to like this community, is they, with few exceptions, they know their laws. Notably, they know that policies aren't laws. So props to them. And yeah, check out his videos.
Across the globe, the Monroe Doctrine was a deep state project. So once...
Yeah, but John Birch Society is not the prime example. It's a fine point, but visually...
Upon a time, the nativists mostly understood. You gotta have that deep state.
The nativists did, but John Birch Society was too batshit even for that. John Birchers were too batshit for fusionism.
You gotta have kind of isolation.
I was hustling to get this out of the way. So, John Bircher's fine, but come to think of it, now that it's uploaded, they can't go back and undo it. John Birch is not... There is a Monroe Doctrine, and a lot of nativists and just a lot of those fusionist groups backed it. John Birchers were too crazy. They believed a lot of this shit was coming from within, as with the fluoride, as with psychiatry. They believed all these things were communist plots, Soviet plots. So they're not a prime example for kind of the potty-trained nativists who bought into fusionism.
Entanglements, or non-isolationist, entanglements. You gotta have adventurous projects, and you gotta have a military that's very strong, because you gotta take out...
Yeah, but John Birch Society is it's a non-example, not just a prime example. Oh, okay, time to go back to being a pig. Man, look at it go.
TikTok and Instagram. Some videos show soldiers trashing Palestinian homes.
Not the TV, not the TV. But what do I actually say? Yikes.
Others.
Yeah, see, I should record more often when I'm high, because I'm like, how do you not think to say, not the TV?
Celebrate or mock the massive level of destruction.
But because I'm high, I'm more creative, so on to the next video it goes. God, I just uploaded nationalism as assembly line identity and or solidarity and or unity and or camaraderie. Take your pick. I picked the non-relational one. I picked identity. If nationalism gives you a fake identity, nationalism is a naughty political boy. If it contributes to some kind of misconception when you think you're slated, to be the way you are nationally. It's like, I'm not slated to be the way I am nationally. So nationalism, don't try any kind of pesky integrity moves on me. You're not necessarily about integrity, nationalism. And so I uploaded the video like 20 minutes ago, and now it's me watching a video called My Views Don't Count. But this video is nationalism as assembly line identity. So what makes me always go back to the MAGAs? They are uniquely bad on this in that with them, it's just so much of their political PR games revolve around saying America over and over again in affirming ways, aspirational ways, hopeful ways. But it's a kind of PR, and it plays better, I think, in America with that MAGA crowd. Like, just pack the word America in your sentences and sound really affirming as you say it more times than any other word, and you're gonna do really well. It's why the modern ones are dumber. There were a lot of, like, the John Birch Society was pro-America, but they knew how to have like complete sentences that form paragraphs. It was, the sloganeering is the worst in MAGA.
America is really about.
Rorschach.
Long stories about what America is really about. Long, mutually exclusive stories about.
And they still don't count.
Yeah, they still
And
don't.
not just
They
mutually
still
exclusive, but truly
frickin' don't.
contradictory in different ways. People can tell long thing
you call America?
just like in the case of the MAGAs.
This thing you call
America,
Double.
that you know is
Double.
a Rorschach test. We see all the different ways. People can tell long stories about what America is really about.
This is too meta for me. I'm turning this off.
I hit rock bottom when I couldn't find a country with the initials KY. I finally ended up in a savage, festering, scum-soaked cesspool of filth and misery where the living envied the dead. Excuse me, I'm looking...
But now it's another layer of meta because I've gotten over it. I can handle it now. So it's another layer of meta. It's 1, 2, 3 of those. You like see 3 layers of carpet and speaker. I picked identity. Nationalism gives you a fake identity. Nationalism is a naughty political boy. If it contributes to some kind of misconception when you think you're slated, to be the way you are nationally. It's like, I'm not slated to be the way I am nationally. And this would be true even if I hadn't, zigzagged, crisscrossed nations. This would be true anyway. So nationalism, don't try it. I would have figured it out anyway. I know it for a fact. Any kind of pesky, integrity moves on me. You're not necessarily about integrity. But I'd like to see stats on that. People who are expats, is that what's necessary for them to kind of figure out that, let's not be spellbounded by the idea that it's in some way healthy? Because I've seen people, when they go off on either, globalist Marxists or the rootless cosmopolitans, they use the word healthy. It's like, these people want to deprive individuals of a healthy sense of national identity. So does it really take being an expat to figure out that there's nothing healthy about it? In fact, it's the opposite of psychological health. It's a kind of bias engine. But I just wonder if anyone knows if there's been a study where like they show that expats figure that out in higher rates than all these people who fear the rootless cosmopolitanism, nationalism. And so I uploaded the video like 20 minutes ago, and now it's me watching a video called My Views Don't Count. But this video is nationalism as assembly line identity. So what makes me always go back to the MAGAs? They are uniquely bad on this in that another thing about that is they haven't figured out it's about ego, right? So I'm not saying by stripping yourself of national identity, be a cheerleader for your nation. MAGA's the best example. They're just cheerleading. They can't figure it out. I'm not saying, therefore, you have to undergo some kind of ego death. Of course not. No, I'm just saying that's where it hoodwinks you. It wants you to have at least a chunk of your ego. See, like, the moderate nationalists, civic nationalists, would say, well, maybe a small chunk of your ego needs to be wrapped up in your sense of national identity. Whereas the ultra-nationalists, all the way up to and including the fascists, would say, no, it won't do to have a small chunk of your ego wrapped up in it. You got to have a massive chunk of your ego wrapped up in that, in an individual, lest you be unhealthy psychologically. But I'm saying, no, you don't even have to have one little ounce of your ego connected to that, right? And the more an individual has in themselves, The more seamless this will be, the easier this will be. It's only those who don't really have anything in themselves who likewise strive to, how did Shaw put it? Flatter their contemporaries in many ways, you know, hoity-toity academic credential ways. I can go down the list. But for the nationalists and the ultra-nationalists especially, the way to flatter your contemporaries is to sign up for the nationalism gambit.
And it's just so much of their...
But that, I want that to be the kind of framing. I want that to be how the pundits take down nationalism. As you just point out, like, you don't think people shouldn't have egos, right? We should all just be individually invested in ourselves, not in any of these, you know, assembly lines. Like, it turns your ego, nationalism turns your ego into an assembly line. And it does damage to your dignity in the process. You know, some versions of nationalism only do so minimally because they only say a small chunk of your ego should be invested in your nation, in nationhood. You know, so civic nationalism, I don't have that much, you know, fire to spit at the civic nationalists because they're not the worst offenders. It's the ultra-nationalists who really want to wrap your ego up in that thing. And then to object to me, they would say something like, they would just invent positions like, you know, they would say that, oh, well, this person thinks you can live an egoless life. No, like I said before, no one can live an egoless life. But, you know, you can just be invested in yourself because you need that ego. You can be invested in yourself and you can see that everything else is facade.
Their political PR games revolve around saying America.
And yeah, I did this a few days ago and I've just, like, now that I recorded it, it's like everything is confirmed. Like all these rants, you people got to understand. I record these rants and then it takes a long time to, you know, figure out what I want to put in which video. And so I wait and I wait and I wait. And then it finally goes up. But in the interim, after I record segment A and then like segment B, and I just got to point out, like everywhere I look, what I ranted about, I just see more evidence for it. They're doing it still.
Over and over again in affirming ways.
Yes.
Aspirational ways.
Just remember what I said. And then when you go on Twitter, when you go wherever, right, you'll see it.
These hopeful ways. But it's a kind of PR. And it plays better, I think, in America.
But if it were purely PR, if they were just Machiavellian about it, okay. It's that they forget about it half the time. They're doing it so often, they forget. It's a Machiavellian game they're pulling. They're dreamy while being Machiavellian. They started out being Machiavellian, and then somewhere along the way, they just got kind of dreamy about it. And then that gets moralized as well. Yeah, you hate America. You hate America. You know, well, yeah, maybe a lot of people truly do hate America. And maybe I hate America. You know, because America is such a, it's a nation for Philistines. When you really think about it, it is. You know, but I can still recognize that, you know, that doesn't preclude the idea that all these other groups that hate America for different reasons are worse. Like the Islamists, like the Third-Worlders, like the, you know, Kim Jong-un crazies, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of worse things than America, but America still, because this kind of PR stuff works with enough of it, like, you can't at once not hate America and hate Philistines. Like, no, you either have to be soft on Philistines or Philistines, and if you're not, if you're hard on the Philistines, you will be hard on America, right? So whenever someone says, I just hate America, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people who hate America for stupid reasons. I am hard on America for the right reasons. And that hardness has kind of spilled over into hatred just because I'm so damn tired of no one, you know, because I'm so damn tired of the fact that my views don't count. Sometimes in the literal click sense, and other times in the, you know, no one debunks these points, but yet these points are not, you know, part of the discourse. So yeah, therefore I hate America. I hate the American punditry. I hate how many things they truly skip over. They all assume that no one can pull this off, that no one can have a massive ego, but not have that ego rely on external fictions like nationhood. No, you can have a massive ego and have it be all about the individual, insofar as you have something substantive to yourself. And there's an entire punditry in America. Like, they talk about stupid things endlessly. They cycle things. And now I can't take any of them seriously. because they haven't figured out it's a fucking clown show. It's a fucking clown show.
With that MAGA crowd, like just say, just pack the word America in your sentences.
One of the ways it's a clown show is this. Another is just pack the word democracy, you know, as many times as possible, and sound equally as affirming as you said, or worry about democracy. I'm worried about democracy. Like, you all have to do a lot better. You'll never appeal to the thinking person, right? You'll never appeal with these kinds of tactics. These kind of tactics that just assume the individual will be hoodwinked by all these external things. Like, no, the individual won't be hoodwinked. Only the vulgar herd. You can only win over one or another section of the vulgar herd, which I guess is the point. So my rant is even self-defeating, because politics is, by definition, it's about winning over the vulgar herd. But I think a lot of people are forgetting that they're not winning any kind of intellectual contest, any kind of, you know, even what is ripe psychological commentary contest. A lot of psychological talk and political talk is fused, like, you know, the whole phenomenon of psychologists talking politics. And so, you know, it's not just that politics is stupid. It's that a lot of people who dip their toes in politics are doing it as specialists in other fields, but they're not making the big point. They're not, because then they'll probably figure out their views won't count either if they're making the big main point. The main point is, you insofar as you're individually complete, you won't fear any of this. You won't fear the nationhood that changes. You won't fear that democracy is going to wane or any of these things.
And sound really affirming as you say it.
And you'll figure out that there's a real weird thing going on where people are Machiavellians, but they're dreamy about their Machiavellianism. And it's never been quite this bad. And this is 10 minutes, and the video is long enough, so I'm just going to end it now. But yeah, I've gone like next level. Like triple meta. Hang on.
God, I just uploaded nationalism as assembly line. Nationalism gives you America.
Where's it?
We see all the different ways.
There we go.
You can tell long stories about what America is really about.
This is too meta for me. I'm turning this off.
And another layer of meta.
You know, he wrote his Buddhism book in 1995. That's how long he's been.
Deliberately late correction for this. He wrote the Buddhism book, Why Buddhism is True, in 2017. He wrote The Moral Animal in 95. There, fixed. But fixed preposterously late, even though I can put it earlier, but I won't, because Bob doesn't deserve immediate correction. Bob deserves a later in the video correction. So, Buddhism book 2017, The Moral Animal book 95.
Doing this. I think he's one of these people who's been doing this.
Yeah, the rest of that is true. And now to make the video preposterously long, because I can't ignore all the current events. So from now on, it's kind of, for the most part, current events, and it'll be passé. But if I don't include it, it'll be even more passé, because it's hard. It's hard not to be passé because things move too fast in the current world. But I have to make this video long because now comes all the current event stuff. Quote unquote current event stuff, newsy stuff.
At the end of the day, we're gonna beat these people. I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but it's been a hard fight. And these people hate our children. Just take our calls. Go ahead, this is the next person. Because we can't give up now. We have to keep going. We have to stay here. We have to let them shut us down. We have to stand all the way to the end, and we're gonna win.
Jones, I think everybody needs a war cry, man. Can you muster a war cry?
It's a big joke.
It's not really, though. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's also inspiring.
My voice will completely go with this, but it's fine. It's my resistance to them. It's a God's transmission. It's a human under attack.
Yeah, that'll help your guy. That'll help your guy.
All right, let's go to one more.
No, let's not. The thing is, I hadn't even gone to InfoWars since I got this new laptop. I had to type it in from scratch. And what else do I land on but Alex crying? One of the reasons I stopped is because Alex just stopped crying, and I popped back in. It's live, and it's Alex crying. So I just figured I had to, because now I record everything, pretty much everything that's amusing, so I had to. But let's see, maybe he'll go back to crying.
We are with you. Because all we ask is that we're with you. Just promote what we did long after we're gone. Like cave drawings. People make those cave drawings. They want to be seen by their future because they love people beyond.
Because they can't quite figure out whether, their guy being a felon is good or bad for them. They're flip-flopping. First, yes, you're going to get more votes. But then, maybe we're not going to get more votes. And so it's just an interesting time.
Oh, well, here's the thing, Alex. We're not going to remember you because you're going to keep going, man.
They don't know how to feel. They go into triumphalistic mode, but then they go into crying mode. The Satanists are winning. And so it's like, within one episode, like flip-flops.
You.
I'm not going to quit.
These motherfuckers are not going to take this from you.
Destroying everything.
They're not going to take this from you. You're a fucking legend, Alex.
I don't care about me. It's that the fact they're coming. The assault is now. The enemy is coming. You understand? It's here. This is it. Do you understand me? It's not about me. The enemy is coming. We're the canary in the coal mine. Go ahead and finish up. I'm going to finish up.
No, man. I mean, whatever you guys need. You guys need anything from Fresh and Fit, man, you tell me. I'll tell you. InfoWars is overrun. Supporting InfoWars store, it's done.
It's shilling time. But yeah, I'm so glad I tuned back in. Maybe I'll tune in more often now that it's now that we got the felon spin. What else did I want to say? I wanted to say something else. Oh yeah, hooray for last minute stuff. I found a way to summarize MAGA. Actually, no, David Frum found a way to summarize MAGA. He doesn't know he's doing it, but he found another way to summarize MAGA. Soft on crime. Bravo, David. What's this? Trump becomes felon audio. No, it's going to have to wait.
God, what I said about...
It's going to have to wait.
Dex, I've got to do a follow-up because...
It has to wait because I opened it up connecting it to something before about Dex, as in Dexter Morgan. And so I can't use it now. And also this video is overstuffed. But yeah, I do a whole other thing about Trump becoming felon in the context of David Frum's commentary.
Became a felon. Trump just became a felon. It's May 30th. Trump just became a felon.
Is it?
And so I got to do the add-on to the Dex thing because David Frum is just all over this on Twitter. Yeah. He's just being...
Yeah, but this video is too stuffed for that. So wait for like 5 or 10 videos from now. Maybe this will be up. I shouldn't have played from the episode itself. Now I'm too gutless to put it in the immediate videos because I don't want those being messed. And this might mess it up because it's from the episode itself I played. But this just to add, I mean, when he dies, he will die. I mean, this should be the kind of, the quintessential photo. There's the person who dies, they play their life montage or whatever, and then this is the final quintessential photo. So, I mean, Biden, right? Mr. Butters, it ought to be his quintessential photo when he croaks in a year or two. With Ayaan, I'm not going to play any of it, but with Ayaan, yeah, come back, weird thing. Dawkins read out a bunch of stuff, weird, very weird, and, non-conclusive. But, with Ayaan, Dawkins calls her political Christian, whereas Dawkins is a cultural Christian. Let's just drive by, invent stuff. But, I'm not going to play any of it because I don't want those voices here. The thing with Ayaan is it's more a rallying cry and a kind of, people who already agree with me, let's affirm each other. It's more a rallying cry, and let's overcome that way by affirming each other. Those of us who are inclined to agree from A to Z on what Ayaan says about Islam. And I'm thereabouts, but I'm going to make a critique here. With Ayaan, it's more a rallying cry than it is a, let's see if we can maybe talk to the other side. There's these people who disagree with us, and it's not like how to maximize the kind of good that might come from that mutual effort. Instead of that, it's more a rallying cry, but it presents itself as something more than that kind of silly, let's affirm each other, those of us who are inclined to agree with A to Z on her on Islam. Let's just affirm each other instead of just realizing the hard work, if you're going to be politically involved, Ayaan, the hard work is actually through mutual discourse. Getting to some spot that's better than this, that's better than the nukes. We're worrying about the nukes going off. A little too much of the press is being wasted on, oh, are the nukes going to go off? You know, at least the press I encounter. Ayaan, you're just not doing the hard work. You're just affirming people who agree with you. But you think you're entitled to do it because of your background. So you're also playing this inverse ID poll stuff. It's blasé commentary by this point, Ayaan. What else you got? What else you got? Oh, I guess the what else you got is Christianity. Oh, so it's so much better now because the what else you got, Ayaan, turns out to be fucking Christianity, born of copes, glaringly. Is Sammy gonna critique you, Ayaan? I don't think Sammy's gonna critique you. So you're covered. You know, no one you care about is gonna critique you, but you care about the critique of too few people. It's just another circle jerk, is what I mean to say. Instead of a genuine, hard but nonetheless good faith effort at engaging in dialogue from one of these people who would push back. It doesn't have to be as bad as like Mehdi Hassan, but it can be someone like, well, I guess I can't think of one off the top of my head. Cenk Uygur would give her a lot of pushback, and it's like she doesn't care that she can't persuade Cenk Uygur. Genk, as I guess permaband AUI would say. Remember AUI? Anyway, he would still affirm Ayaan, but I'm not here to affirm Ayaan. I'm here to disaffirm Ayaan, because Ayaan's doing the easy thing. Ayaan's leaning in to the concern only over the critique of those who you already agree with. Don't concern yourself with anything else. Just, but it's this channel. Ew. Not playing it. Man, look at it go. I mean, I don't know how I made the phone camera foggy permanently, but it's foggy permanently now. Oh, I guess the what else you got is Christianity. Oh, so it's so much better now because the what else you got, Ayaan, turns out to be fucking Christianity, born of copes. Massive copes. Massive copes. Some of the most massive copes in the history of public exposure. Who can compare the level of copery exposed on full display under public exposure to Ayaan? I can't think of it. Is Sammy gonna critique you, Ayaan? I think the segment's title will be literally true. I'll bet you dollars to donuts the segment's title. I'll end up posting this months after this whole event, so this will be one of the later videos. But I'll end up posting this, and I'll bet you it will have been true. But in the meantime, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, and then some. Sammy will dodge this. Sammy will not spit even a little bit of he won't even give her a little bit of a spank. Sammy will dodge this. The segment's title is literally true. I don't think Sammy's gonna critique you, so you're covered.
To say that if you're hearing this, you're not currently on our subscriber feed, and will only be hearing the first part of this conversation. In order to access full episodes of the Making Sense podcast, you'll need to subscribe at Sam.
No thanks, Sam. I get quite fed up with you as it is in these incomplete ones. Quite fed up for years, but I just can't quit you either. There's a number of people I can't quit, and Sam, I can't quit you, even though just half of your stuff. And I've been fed up with you for ages, but let's see what else. Let's see what else you say. Let's see what other clip in a few seconds here I can play as to an indication of just kind of assertions. And then it's just too preposterous to counter-argue, but I'm just going to make these assertions.
This was obviously a tragic accident.
Ooh, perfect.
And
now, you know what? What do you think he said it about? I think we all know what he said it about.
The atrocities committed on that day, and about Israel's response to them, remain...
Indeed, there were atrocities, but you can have multiple zigzaggy perspectives on who are the bad guys first and who are now inching, but not quite there, but who are now inching as being almost halfway as bad as the bad guys on the 7th who killed the Vicks of the 7th. Are they inching toward that? Sam's going to say they're not. They're not even inching to the point where it needs to be defended.
And something to behold. This episode is...
And yes, I agree. People are way too unsympathetic to the mere existence of Israel. I understand. They should be more sympathetic. But God, Sam, what you're about to say...
Speak with Douglas Murray and Josh Sepps about the current state of the war and public.
Douglas, oh, I know what to put following this. Yes, I take some shots at Mr. Murray. I'm gonna follow up with that.
Opinion? Several things have happened since I recorded this conversation with Douglas and Josh, however. Most notably, the IDF accidentally killed some of the staff working for Chef Jose Andreas' aid organization, World Central Kitchen. This was obviously a tragic accident, and yet much of the world has responded as though it weren't an accident at all. And that it...
Oh, how stupid of me. I'm sorry, Sam.
See, look, he's got the Destiny tag.
This is him defending the World Central Kitchen bombings.
Israel's military chief said it was a mistake that followed a misidentification at night during a war in very complex conditions. It shouldn't have happened. No, that's bullshit. The hostage situation where the 3 hostages were shot, that was a chaotic moment. For this, targeted airstrike for people that you had intel on ahead of time on a pre-approved humanitarian aid route, shooting convoy vehicles, no, that excuse doesn't work there. Even if a Hamas member was on board, that can't be the calculation. We're gonna go ahead and blow up 3 humanitarian aid vehicles with 6 or 9 foreign nationals on it because a Hamas member is on board. That can't be the calculation. It's too much. That's unhinged.
They'll literally click
Unhinged, I agree. But Sam thinks otherwise.
Very few people have that kind of courage. People are cowed. I don't know how you were born that way, what motivates you, but you know.
No, he can afford security. That's the one big one. Like round the clock, 24/7 security to protect him and his family. And then the bigger factor is he can afford to not have any source of income. I guess he'd have to take a step back on defending or contributing to effective altruism, that whole 10% giving what we can, you know. But in terms of like actual his livelihood, you know, his shelter and nutrition and so on, no, he's set for life. So maybe find someone else who actually has their nuts on the line, who's as outspoken or even more outspoken. See, with him, because he's so concerned about, you know, taking the pledge and giving what we can and stuff like that, like it has to be a moral dilemma. Because if his income drops, you know, from the podcast or whatnot, then his contributions to saving lives through effective altruism also drops. So he's kind of entangled himself in these moral dilemmas by taking stuff like EA very seriously. Because, you know, it is admirable to want to save lives, but then you should also be able to vet what kind of lives you're saving, which he's not doing. But just to go back here, like...
I was moved by him saying that, Sam, because...
Sam, the courageous, outspoken hero who has round-the-clock security and is set for life in terms of the monies.
Very few people have that kind of courage. People are cowed.
Yes.
I don't know what...
People who can't afford security and can't afford to lose their jobs are cowed, yes. But some people who can afford to lose those, or who stand to lose it without being able to afford to lose it, are still outspoken. And yet I never really see things with like a lot of traffic. The Comedy Cellar. So he's going on Comedy Cellars. You know, maybe you all should kind of find someone whose nuts are on the line and who are still risking things by being outspoken.
How
I'm not even saying me. I'm just saying there's probably better candidates out there.
You were born that way, what motivates you, but...
He was born to the right kitty cat. There. Now it's a PG-13 segment. He was born to the right kitty cat. 3, 2, 1. It's actually seeing the static. And now just to preload everything that's about to come, with me, it's never been about questions of statehood. Those are never primary. Nothing close to it. You know, or territorial sovereignty, or, you know, it's ancestral land, and what group belongs to the ancestral land versus what doesn't. Like, none of those questions, like, really, including statehood. I know statehood animates the majority of the commentators who sound off on what I'm about to launch into. It's not about statehood. It's just the fact the region is a humanitarian disaster, and so it fascinates one merely on that account. So that's how I can justify having done this much on it this late in the video. But I do a lot on it this late in the video. So this is just a kind of forewarning that, like, you're not going to get some hardline view on matters of statehood. You know, I have by those metrics, I have very tepid views all throughout. But if you're, you know, into kind of certain moral substantive commentary and moral substantive critique, it's easy to see why. It fascinates one. I don't have tepid view on those lens. There I'm spitting fire. Because this is a fucking humanitarian disaster. And it has been, and it's just no one in sight it seems to have the slightest idea that it boils down to the common denominator boils down to group identity and people's inability to relinquish it. Because they've got nothing else behind it. First I start light and then I go heavy. First I start comedic, so enjoy. I have probably too many points to make about this war in Gaza that's been spanning since October 2023. Now we're pushing spring 2024, but I'll probably upload this one much later. This is one of those maybe timely things because it's one of those maybe worthwhile points. I have too many potential worthwhile points to make about the Israel invasion now that's spanning since October of Gaza and what they have to do in terms of their, you can say maybe retribution mission, but ultimately to keep themselves safe. There's too many people who would even, question that simple a premise. But I have too many of these zigzaggy points where I want to punch both camps. But, those are serious points. And I don't feel like being serious right now. I just have to make one of these. I have to build on a non-serious one I make. No, it's not the bridges. I made a non-serious rant, which actually I do feel this. In terms of affect, what I feel the most, the reason that kind of segment where I make it about the bridge closing, the reason that packs punch is because that is truly the most affect I have. I'm not saying it's never crossed my mind. It's like, why can't you just freaking close one of the bridges that actually I rely on for once? But then I made it about this Scott thing. I analogized Scott and I said, like, what if he were reanimated Brown? I didn't say that, I wrote that. Like, what if Scott the Dick from South Park were reanimated to be Brown? Wouldn't it be so fitting in terms of my history of just not even engaging these people, but just observing how they argue? It's just pack as much question begging as you possibly can and be as impervious to reason as you possibly can. Everything that's convenient to you, you will be credulous. Everything that's inconvenient, you will be incredulous on. Just these, these people, it kind of goes both ways, but it is somewhat worse. But then I got to thinking, there's a kind of mild Scott effect. If you know Scott the Dick from South Park, the character, right? So that's kind of that with the volume turned up. But for me, just the older I get, there's what I'm going to call the mild Scott effect, whereas everyone who has on something, a profound disagreement with me, they don't have to be rude. They just come off like Scott. It's just like what. It best explains why I'm not eager to join any kind of debate, live stream debate or something. For me, it will feel like I'm arguing against a bunch of Scots if the issue is kind of profound enough and I care about it enough. And they're just these brick walls. So for me, this ties into one of those South Park things, like life takes on South Park itself. In many ways, indeed it does, because everyone just looks like a mild Scot. Scott is really best exemplified in the Palestinian kind of people who are just dooming their own cause with their conduct and their kind of loading and overloading of question begging into every single sentence they spout. That's kind of Scott as depicted in the show South Park, Scott the Giant Dick. But like everyone else who has at least these disagreements with me on at least one profound issue, they start to look like Scots when they become impervious to my arguments. Even if they're mild-mannered, I just see a kind of mild Scot. But on a maybe more serious note on the Gaza war, one thing I think everyone has to accept is that one side is more, and let's say there's two sides, nice old binary. We can say for sure that, I think it's impossible to contest credibly, that one side is more concerned with the preservation of innocent life in the near term than the other. And that's being the side that unfortunately says things like Zionism a lot and goes on about that whole thing. But at the same time, I think everyone has to agree. That side is the side that's more concerned with the preservation of innocent life and not giving in to collateral damage or, these kids we can say are innocent. Whereas in terms of which side is actually got the better strategy for the long-term preservation of innocent life, and I mean here, preservation in terms of not being murdered. I don't mean anything beyond that. To get Hamas, because Hamas hides under them. And so, it doesn't matter how diabolical and barbaric the IDF gets to be, because ultimately it's, as the record shows, it's a carte blanche carte blanche. Anyway, there's the asymmetry in terms of why you can't completely not take the people who go around saying Zionism a lot. Like, they are clowns, but the one thing that maybe they can't even put this way, but I'm going to put it this way. One side is more concerned for short-term innocent lives. The other side's got more of its views for the long-term stuff, especially in terms of their people. What's the future of their people? They believe that, you know, short-term they'll take some hits reputationally. But then, like, do they have the right strategy long-term? That's the asymmetry. It's hard to tell who's got the right strategy. I think that if you've killed this many people and you can't even get the world to agree just how many of this Hamas group you've taken out by this point. Like, what's the percentage? It really ought to have been for these kinds of counts, body counts, to be justified. They would have had to have at this point killed like 99% of the leadership and even the crazies on the ground. But you know, they haven't done anything like that. They're replicating some of it. And so I don't think they have the right long-term strategy. It's as simple as that. It's not that you can never bomb an idea out of existence. It's just you can only do so rarely, and kind of you got to take drastic steps. You got to go Hiroshima, Nagasaki level drastic steps, and namely because they're in the neighborhood, then they get all the ricochets of that, so they can't do it that way for that reason either. But yeah, that's the asymmetry. Short term, it's clearly, what should I call them? The Scots, the Scott, the Dick character from South Park. They've got kind of one point that they can't even articulate, but I'll articulate for them. God. It's hard to say they're wrong in terms of the long-term thing. It's hard to say which side is wrong in terms of the long-term stability. But it's easy to see which side is more concerned with the short-term stuff. Israel's thinking big, and you can kind of say they've been cornered. That's why they're thinking big. But, 6.5 months in, and maybe it's time to stop thinking big. Maybe it's time to at least stop losing the PR war. God. But then again, you can take Coleman Hughes' line on this, which I just heard, and thus needed to addend. You can just take Coleman Hughes' line on this and say, well, maybe there's some Jews who are deluded enough to think they can solve the problem. He didn't say it that way. That's my preface. Although there are some deluded Jews who think that they can solve the Hamas problem by going full blast in every part of Gaza and beyond if it gets to be a hot war, and then deal with other groups like Hezbollah. Though they may be deluded to think that that'll solve the problem, short or long term. Nonetheless, as Coleman put it, they might, some of them at least might think that they're managing the problem because, and this is my spin on it, my kind of poetic spin on it, but every dead Hamas member or every dead Hezbollah member and so on and so forth, including the Iranian regime, every single dead member is a small boon to Jewish life. They're kind of most fierce antagonists who are not going to change their minds. He's right. Coleman Hughes is right. It's interwoven into their identity, certainly with the Palestinian rejectionism of any kind of pluralist compromise. It's woven to the identity in ways these other horrible things in the past are not. That was his decent point. Americans and the Japanese, Americans and the Germans, before and after World War II, broadly speaking, got along, or at least there was no hot wars between them. It was just during World War II that things got really intense. But with Palestinians, this Jews must get out thing, river to the sea thing, has been a long-standing intergenerational thing. So it's more woven to their identity. So some Jews may be deluded enough to think they're going to solve this problem. Others may be motivated to continue being involved in terms of making it into a hot war because they think there's no better way to manage the problem, because they are at least killing a non-zero number of Hamas members. Right? If they withdrew, as I recommended a few minutes ago, the previous audio, if they withdrew, well, there'll be more members. And you're going to say, well, there's going to be more members down the road because they're inciting some of it. But then they'll manage it the same way at that point too. That would be the kind of retort. They don't think they can solve it, but they can't just do nothing because then they're taking out a zero as opposed to a non-zero number of Hamas members. So I guess I've now kind of steel-manned both sides, but that doesn't change the fact that what I said is still true. Short term, one side is far more concerned preservation of innocent life. Insofar as you accept there's a non-zero number of Palestinians who are innocent, properly speaking. like the kids, as I keep kind of hoping to emphasize decently enough. The kids are innocent, so short term, long term, we don't know. But maybe it's not about the solutions anyway, because all Israelis want to do is just manage it. Insofar as you accept the premise, and it's the poetic sounding premise, each dead Hamas member is a kind of mini boon to Jewish life and Jewish political survival in the region. But I also like my spin on. Let's take them to Hawaii, and then we can bait and switch the Palestinians with their own state and then jinx them. All right, but here's how to even sweeten the deal. Netanyahu off to The Hague, right? That's kind of giving them what they want without giving them their crazy demands. Like, they all want Netanyahu in The Hague, the Hague, if I'm going to be original about it. Original and Eastern. Netanyahu to The Hague, right? And so, Hague, if you want to say Hague, but they don't get from the river to the sea unless we psych them out. But they don't actually get, Israel's not going anywhere, like I said. In nationalism as assembly line identity. Israel's not going anywhere, so they can't get everything they want. But one of the things they want really badly is Netanyahu in that fucking Hague, rotting. And so why not give them that? He kind of belongs there. He's the worst on the Jew side. Hamas is the worst on the Palestinian side. You gotta know the Netanyahu cabinet is the worst of the worst on the Jew side. So why not? Give him the Hague. I mean, it is plainly absurd, just the more I think about it, for anyone, even if you want to go full throttle Team Jew, it is plainly absurd to think that every single member of the leadership ever since, 2008, I'm using 2008 because that's Ezra Klein's delineation year. Ezra said he felt, Israel thumbs up, but then came 2008 and onward, and then the West Bank shit got out of control, and all these other local things that I've only minimally investigated. Apparently, Ezra's credible enough. He can do the empathy thing when it comes to the outgroup, Ezra himself being Jewish. So for him, who's done his heavy-duty investigation, says post-2008 Israel, kind of a different beast than pre-2008 Israel. You can of course say they were egged on, the second Intifada. The tentifada. No, the tentifada is not the really bad one. It's the intifada that's the really bad one. So there were these 2 rounds of intifadas, and Jews as a people just had enough. And according to him, there's the 2008 and onwards Israel, where the West Bank stuff, the settlements got out of control. And so, just like what exactly is the expectation, even for those who are full throttle Team Jew? Is it that no one should at all be pointing out that you've killed a lot of people? No one should point that out? Or we're going to say, even when it comes to those Israeli troops who glorify the killing and who dance and who post their celebratory stuff, I guess to do a tit for tat for the Palestinians who celebrated on the 7th and after the 7th as the bodies were being dragged. It seems that these Israeli troops who are celebrating, doing the ransacking and all these awful things, on video, they're doing it. It's almost like a na, we can celebrate awful things too. And so what's the expectation? That no one's going to say anything negative about that ever? Because it's all Hamas, so it's carte blanche because it's all Hamas. No, it's not carte blanche if you're a moral individualist. You get to always point to any particular individual acting a fool, whether a moral fool or some other kind of fool, a self-indulgent groupie fool. If they're acting a fool, you get to point that out. I don't care that Hamas started the war. It's true, by the way. It's true. There was a ceasefire, as it's often said. There was a ceasefire on the 6th. And then Hamas ruined that. And that is true. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to look at individual people doing individually stupid things or just rotten things and be non-judgmental about it and say something like, everything that happens in the Gaza Strip is Hamas's fault now. Everything that happens. No, if I see an individual Jew troop dancing and acting a fool, well, that's on that troop. Troops ought to take this kind of stuff far more seriously. Even when, the group warfare thing is embedded in their mind. I do a modification for BR's track, Lose Your Head. Graffin sings, self-pity is always a case of mistaken identity, where I just changed that to group warfare is always a case of mistaken identity. But it seems so many of the, especially the fighters, the militants in these two camps, the Palestinians and the Israelis, it seems that so many of them, it's like the group warfare is embedded. They indulge it. They lean into it. You're not supposed to lean into that kind of stuff. And so, like, what is the expectation? Like, if you're a full throttle Team Jew, which I think is, it can be defended. But, like, when you get pissy that people are putting emphasis on things that you'd prefer there not be emphasis, like, that's when you lose the plot. You can have whatever your emphasis is, but when you full-blown insult, as Eli Lake does, like someone just makes some point and Eli just insults them personally because I guess he wants to signal that he's just above it because his side is the right side, he feels. And so that even when the opposite side member brings up something credible, like he feels like he can just do one of these I'm trying to be a twat or comedian things. Like, no, Eli, you're failing. And many such people who want to signal how impatient they are with anything because Hamas truly is that bad. No, you guys are failing. You guys always have patience because there's enough crap. There is enough crap that your side is doing. And the leadership is lenient on it. Very lenient to the point where, yeah, I understand. Bibi. I can sort of picture it as a thing that's in line with justice. I can picture a future with Bibi in The Hague, and it's a matter of justice. If you're the kind of pro-team Israeli that can't picture that, like even Bibi is absolved of all wrongdoing, when is one of the rabbit holes here is, Bibi finding it politically advantageous to have an empowered Hamas. Right? What's the counter to that? I'd love to see it. Maybe there's a counter to that, but I don't know. So it's like if it is on Hamas, but at the same time there's the facilitators. One of the facilitators is Bibi. So it's not just that I want Bibi in The Hague so as to placate the other side. No, you can even say it's also my request. It's also my preference. But also just to placate them because they're not going to get everything they want. Because the most fanatical ones, everything they want is for Israel to cease to be. So Israel's got a right to exist, and so they're not going to get what they want, but at least you can meet them, maybe not halfway there, but you can put that motherfucker in The Hague. And then they'll be a little placated, and then you can maybe have a deal. You can have, Camp David 2.0. It's like one of the prerequisites for Camp David 2.0, where they realize they're not going to get anything better. Like like Arafat held out the first time. He held out because he thought he would get something even better. A state with a navy or airspace or stuff like that. It's like, no, you guys got to prove it. You guys got to prove that you can be disciplined enough to do it before you get, a fully fledged sovereign state. That was about as good a deal as they were going to get in Camp David in 2000. The thing Clinton put together. But Arafat held out because it wasn't anywhere close to a full-fledged thing. It's like, you guys did the intifadas. You can't be trusted with a full-fledged thing yet. As the Germans couldn't be after World War II, as the Japanese couldn't be. There was a period of interval where those states weren't, in any proper sense, sovereign states. And so maybe one such interval can exist as well here, right? Doesn't have to be, 20 years. It can maybe be, if they behave, it can be maybe 5 years, and then, they get airspace, and then another 5 years, they get another thing, and maybe they get more of the territory, but to have them come to the table, just say, yeah, we'll put Bibi in The Hague. And maybe you can have good faith negotiations. But if everyone just thinks that by fighting, you're going to resolve it, no. By fighting, it's advantage Jews. It's advantage Israelis, this fighting thing. Negotiations, that's a different story. At least you can have the expansion of the settlement stop if you go into negotiation mode. So yes, it's the Palestinians who have done worse in terms of failing to negotiate. But the giddiness of certain members of Team Jew, their giddiness, it's like that giddiness goes into overdrive when you can't even admit that Bibi belongs in The Hague. Both for practical reasons, to sweeten the deal, and because he fucking facilitated the continued existence of Hamas, because it's a coherent telling. It was in his political advantage for Hamas to persist. What's the counter to that? That's one of these things I don't see a counter. I'd love to see Sammy H, give a counter to that. You know, Sam's got his facts, indisputable facts, but then there's these things that are omissions, like what the fuck is his answer? What the fuck is his answer to the behind-the-scenes machinations where the frickin', you know, he was elected more than once. All these people who have been elected since 2008, they've not been the kind of people that are there to ease tensions. They're the kind of people, Israelis have elected a kind of leadership that just pours gasoline on the flames. Or, you know, something, whatever my metaphor that's not worn out is going to be this time. And now, slightly later in the future. You know, I said at some point there, they've killed a lot of people, and they don't have enough to show for it. So it's only fair, since I kept it vague. I deliberately kept it vague, because I don't want to get into this, you know, Hamas tallies versus, or no, not Hamas, but that, you know, a ministry, health ministry thing that's affiliated with Hamas. And I don't want to just rehash those debates, but you know, their numbers are something like now well over 35,000, or hell, it could be over 40,000 by this point, because they've gone into Rafah by now, right? So it's probably over 40,000 by those tallies, but then Team Jew severely disputes those tallies. So, you know, I'm critical of Team Jew too, but I'm doing this kind of steel manning thing of Team Jew. So there, I got something queued up here. The way they wrote it down, I don't want to butcher this, so I got it queued up here. I'm going to read it out. So this is kind of Team Jew, what they're saying the actual numbers are. This is kind of Team Jew, actually, we've killed a lot less. We've not killed that many. And so it writes, and I've not vetted it independently, but then again, how the hell do you vet this? You know, I guess, you know, I'd have to be a journalist on the ground. I'd have to go to Gaza, which they wouldn't allow me to do anyway, you know, to do a credible report. But this is, you know, allegedly the credible report on the fatalities. So it reads, that brings the total number of Palestinian fatalities down by over 11,000, nearly a third of the commonly reported total. And that's not all. The Palestinian statistical agencies are famous for using under 20 as their marker for separating children and adults. I don't actually have much against that. I remember myself at 19 and 20, and I resembled my, you know, 12-year-old self at 19 and 18. I resembled my, like, 12-year-old self far more than I resemble my current self. So I don't even mind, you know, us looking at, you know, really, really late teens types and calling them children. I don't mind that. But here it says, you know, Palestinian statistical agencies are famous for using under 20 as their marker for separating children and adults. That means among the, quote, children are likely a number of 18 and 19-year-olds, i.e. not children. So I dispute it. Sure, I would call them children, but, you know, they're insisting here they're not children. And, you know, maybe for wartime tallies, we got to be a little more formal than I am. You know, psychologically, I would say, yes, they are children, but maybe we ought to be a little more formal in terms of these dividing lines. Yeah, but it reads, that means among the children are likely a number of 18 and 19-year-olds, i.e. not children. Additionally, we know the IDF encounters 16 and 17-year-old militants in the field, meaning a chunk of the, quote, children are actually combatants. And of course, Hamas makes no distinction between combatants and civilians when counting the casualties. It's possible then, perhaps even likely, that the IDF has achieved a civilian to combatant casualty ratio of around 1.5 to 1, an unheard of level of precision and civilian protection in urban warfare. So, you know, it sounds kind of slightly comedic to me, but because I am fair cop, I'm going to read it out here in this slew of audios where I'm at times steel manning and at times, you know, very much questioning the Jew side. And at the end, you know, kind of unreservedly saying they ought to retreat, or maybe they ought not retreat, but if I were a member of their military, yes, I would have retreated on day 0. I don't care what you try to do to me as a member of some persecuted group. I don't care what you try to do to me, even if it's a hot war. I'm not targeting the outgroups and doing conjecture to kind of figure out who's a baddie versus a not baddie from the outgroups. No, I have to do the individualism thing. Even if I'm a member of some, persecuted group, I'm still going to treat the members of the out group as they come. Maybe that would be different if I were actually in a hot war, but seeing as how I've known nothing but peacetime in my life, that's how I just function. I don't do this. I don't round off groups and just do, certainly, killing of them, because I'm just going to round it off and assume they're all bad. But, the current thing just came out and says that, the health ministry is down by at least 11,000. They're off by 11,000 deaths, fatalities. And so I just want to kind of read that out. And thus concludes my, slew of audios about the dreaded, the wretched war. Now this is in reference to the thing I just said I would close out, but didn't. I'm going to do another minute or so on it. It's one of those things that as soon as the jog started, I'm like, oh, I got to do this even as a jog audio. But I didn't bring the case for my wireless earbuds. And of course, I'm listening to tunes as I'm jogging. So it's like anytime I try an audio and the earbuds are out, and I even turn them off, it doesn't matter. Like, unless they're in that case, the audio is ruined. So I waited now for over an hour to do this. But it's just 1 minute addition to the thing I just said I would close out. Because I use the word retreat, and it's pretty clear that I'm using it only in one sense. I meant it in at least two senses. I didn't just mean I would retreat militarily. I would retreat from the IDF and I would kind of, become a pacifist within Israel. No, I meant it as kind of advice for the average person living in Israel, whether you're a Jew or something else. No matter how many rights you have, if you're in the land of Israel, certainly if I were a citizen and if I were Jewish, right, I would retreat as an individual if it truly is about personal safety, right? And feeling under siege, then I would do some research on whatever. I would keyword search safest country in the world for Jews, or for kind of Israelis who want to flee a Jew land, and I would move to that country. I'm sure you're well-to-do if you are a Jew and an Israeli. I'm sure you're well-to-do such that that country would accept you. I'm sure it's a Western country. Just per capita, how often do Jews get targeted? How often is it recorded? How often are the violent criminals these anti-Semites? And I would find the country with the least amount of incidents of that, and I would move there as a Jew. I'd be well-to-do, so I'm sure they would have me. So that's what I meant by retreat. I didn't just mean militarily. I didn't just mean I wouldn't fight their stupid hot wars and do a bunch of guesswork as to what kind of kid to blow up. Oh, if it's 16 and 17, they're likely a militant. Kablamo them before they kablamo you. I wouldn't do any such thing. But I would also retreat from the land, because there's enough. It's just enough, to me, what looks like melodrama, but to them, kind of a soap opera of a lifetime. Yeah, I would not feed into their soap opera of a lifetime. I would do my part and I would retreat. I would not let my religious identity kind of school me into staying and swindle me into staying. No, if it truly is about personal safety, then you can say each individual has reason to flee. So you just have to do your homework and find a country that's least hostile to Jews through these, recorded incidents of anti-Semitic or whatever other, targetings of Jews by these, usually unrattled people. So what's wrong with that advice? I don't think a single thing is wrong. So I used retreat, and I meant it in this dual sense. But that's construed as very offensive or maybe even anti-Semitic. I'm telling Jews as a non-Jew what to do. It's like, well, if the facts bear it out, and if it truly is about just this earthly matter, about your personal safety, it's you can't contest the advice. No, it's because it's more than an earthly matter for you. It's otherworldly. You got to be in touch with Yahweh. It's otherworldly for you. And so you got to make trade-offs between your immaterial and your material values. So it's not as simple as people are making it out to be. There's this otherworldly element that's keeping some of them there. Some of them, I'm sure, just haven't heard the advice or don't want to betray their families. Their families would disown them if they left. It's like, you got to stay and fight with us. It's like, I wouldn't stay. I wouldn't even stay in Serbia. Well, I was too young by the time they dragged me away to come back and like it, but neither here nor there. I would retreat. And this is kind of an audio that I've kind of been working over in the mind, because I couldn't do it while jogging because I had the earphones out. Audio would have been scrambled. One thing that has to be reckoned with psychologically, this is just to kind of throat clear again, but one thing that has to be reckoned with that hasn't been psychologically speaking, this whole affair ramped up since fall last year. There's a very important thing, psychologically speaking, that is evident to me that has not been reckoned with. You know, this is why I'm saying it's not about nationhood. It's not about any of this other territorial obsessions and what else did I say? So certainly it's not about ancestral land. No, what it's about is both sides perceive the glee of the other in a purely negative way. So anytime there's a kind of public gathering, you can see that, like if there's some cheerful public gathering because of a big protest in favor of Palestinians, you see the Jew side interpret all of that negatively. So to really drive it home, you would just have to compare it with, let's say, shortly after 9/11. Let's say one of these rock groups. Oh, let's say Porcupine Tree. Let's say Steven Wilson just bumps his head and goes a little kooky and decides to be one of these people who feels like they have to be super edgy, but like the edgiest of edgy. And so suppose like in the latter half of Gravity Islands, when it really starts rock and rolling, but in that progressive way it starts rock and rolling, it's angelic, even though it's extremely hard rock. That second half of Gravity Islands. First half, very light song. Second half goes kablamo. But it's also angelic because, of course, the production values of Porcupine Tree, of course it would be angelic. But suppose that track were actually called, because Steven Wilson bumped his head and went a little kooky and felt he needed to be the most edgy rock guy out there. Suppose that track had contained a music video where it's just, starting at that latter half, it's just the Twin Towers falling, and the track is called Mwahahaha 9/11. And the build up to the big kablamo part where it's light, it's just the jihadists coordinating. And that the jihadists pull it off. They hijack that flight 90 something, too high to recall. They hijack that. And then when the song goes kablamo, the latter half, that's when the planes hit, and that's when the towers keep falling, and they just keep replaying from different angles. And maybe there's a kind of lyric that goes mwahahahaha, and the song is retitled to mwahahahaha 9/11. Now imagine in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, especially an American, how they would take that. They wouldn't take it too kindly. There's no comedic Overton window that would accommodate that. But let's say Steven Wilson of Porcupine Tree bumped his head and went ahead and, pursued one such project, and that's what, Porcupine Tree released. Suppose they released Gravity Islands, retitled into Mwahahaha 9/11, shortly after 9/11. Because Steven went kooky, right? No one would take that tastefully. No one would, be worried about being perceived as woke or something if they just were appalled at that. There wouldn't be one such worry, because everyone would understand that's in poor taste. It is edgy, but it's also in very, very poor taste. And that's how the glee of Jews is perceived by Palestinians and vice versa. And so onward I go now. But yeah, this is, God, they just saved 4 hostages, or 5. They just saved 4 hostages. I didn't talk about it at all in terms of what's upcoming. But I just read that, this video could have been done yesterday before they saved the hostages. But no, I had to go ahead and think I have to move about instead of just continuing to edit. I had to think, I got to walk around, get my step count up. No, I didn't. And see now what happened? They released the hostages, and they saved, I should say, the hostages. And now I can't talk about it because this is just the throat clear. It kind of might undermine some of the harshness, the fact that they saved these 4 hostages. Now everything I say in terms of my kind of rough talk, especially concerning this IDF stuff, it may now be undermined because of the stupid timing, because I couldn't keep editing yesterday because of the stupid timing. But yeah, imagine a music video, mwahahaha 9/11. That's how the glee is being perceived by the others. They can't take common joy at each other's publicly expressed glee. They can't rejoice in that. They always have to be mortified by it, as an American would be at one such described video that I just conjured before I hit record, because that's what I do when I'm on the liftoff. I conjure these types of things. So I should have license to do music videos, but no one's offering me anything. No one's offering me a contract. But like, if I were given the license to do music videos, just wait till I get to the video, Man Given Over to Art. There, I license myself a number of videos that I've just described of this kind of sort. Many of which are crass. At any rate, hooray for last minute stuff. Sam's flying off the handle, and it's the classics.
Generally, I'm very hawkish on the topic of jihadism.
Ought we be hawkish on jihadism? It's a very tough question. I guess it depends on where exactly. There are these strongholds, and then there's very much the opposite. Afghanistan.
And I have been ever since September 11th, 2001. While my views here are...
And how that crap bleeds into stuff like just ruining Libya. What you're gonna say? That's 0% on us? Who ruined Libya? Oh, it's 0% us. Yes. Now I'm kind of doing the classics of the kind of classics I did maybe 13 years ago, shortly after I started on YouTube. I was like, ha, America did bad things, and I'm gonna do videos about it. Ha. I guess I just did that again.
Widely mischaracterized and often misunderstood. I make no apologies.
Yummy
for them.
yums.
Right, anyone who thinks that we can compromise with jihadists either doesn't understand.
Yeah, we can't compromise, but it's like there's other kinds of social problems here. But thankfully, jihadism, where I'm at, is like I don't have to compromise in my daily. I don't know. Maybe Sam does. I guess anyone who has security is anyone who's famous and has security is necessarily compromising. So I have sympathy for that, and I certainly have sympathy for someone like Salman Rushdie. But it's just personally, it's like it's not a problem for me.
Or some species of lunatic. But please believe me when I say that I wish I never had to touch this topic ever again.
Yummy yum yums.
It is vile. And confusion about it, especially on the part of secular liberals.
And secular leftists and secular tankies and so on and so forth. I would imagine they wouldn't shy away from the term secular.
Is also vile.
Yes, it is.
Nothing reduces my faith in humanity more.
A little histrionic.
Than routinely confronting educated people who have no capacity to discern the moral high.
It's about their reasons, Sam. Do none of them ever say anything that's interesting? How about that podcast where that Jew guy hosted that thoughtful Palestinian guy? Well, the guy didn't really live in Palestine or what was called Palestine, but you know, there's that podcast that's been circulating how he just let him talk, and it's about the deeper reasons. How about that, Sam? You know, the reasoning chain. You know, I've seen people say smart things on both sides. I've seen a lot of people say stupid things on both sides. It's not as simple as just the conclusions.
The difference is so stark and so simple. For instance, there are people who use their own children as human shield.
I agree, and this is back to the classics. I agree with this classics. Another classic here.
There are people who kill their own daughters for the crime of getting raped because they have stained the family's honor.
I hope you've got your eyes on the screen, because this is one of those times I'm just going to let the record speak for itself. So I hope you got... I do records after these kinds of concerns Sam has. Sam, I wonder if he would be inclined to use some of these records as a way of shorthanding what needs to be explained. You know, a lot of times the egg really is on the Muslims in my records, I have to admit.
There are people who care more about...
But you know, when he's just so serious about it all the time, like he never makes jokes about this stuff, but like check out my records. It's like we should just mock Muslims more. I guess it's easier for me to say because I don't need security.
Violence done to a truly terrible book than about the destruction of whole societies. And at this point in human history, the overwhelming majority of people who are this confused about how to live good lives are Islamic extremists. And the worst...
Yeah, you can't dispute the classics.
Then it's not Europe anymore.
How do you deal with it without becoming the thing you don't want to become?
Too late.
Hate our children.
Yeah, you will never hear a more earnest, sweet laugh from me. That's like the sweetest laugh I've ever done on the internet, because it's just so earnest and genuine. There's a lot more from this whole day. I did a lot more. It can't go here. Just like with Ayaan, I did a lot more with Ayaan. This video is just impossibly long, but yeah, more to come here. Maybe a few videos from now. Whew. The Duckman episode on the Scopes trial theme, where King Chicken gets into he drugs him and gets him to think, or at least to say, that the egg came before the chicken. And so he gets tried for that because they're small-minded. Well, they're like the folks in the movie. What is it called? What is the movie called? The movie had a name. It wasn't called The Scopes Trial. Inherit the Wind. Thank you. Inherit the Wind. So this is kind of their Scopes Trial, Inherit the Wind episode. And,
all part of my plan to start a new world, worshipping at an altar of my own design. Chicken creationism would infect every town and city, a massive organization of small-minded intolerance so powerful it could defeat any...
I mean, the show works because Jason Alexander voices Duckman. That's the biggest reason the show works. And also because that Greg Berger guy voices Cornfred. But the third reason the show works is because King Chicken is voiced by Tim Curry, is the guy's name. So those three voices make up like a huge reason why the show just works.
Anything, except of course NYPD Blue. And I would be the Messiah. But I knew I needed a Judas, so I drugged you to say egg and made you an enemy of the people. The glue to hold my society together. For nothing so unites the ignorant masses like a common hatred.
I would say let's rewind that and replay it in case Douglas Murray and his pretenses to being high-minded, and truth-spewing first and foremost. Let's rewind that in case Douglas Murray is watching, just to make him think, like, might I be playing this kind of card every now and then? Might I be playing this kind of card? See, Douglas Murray needs to go back to watching 90s kind of proto-based adult cartoons to make him see what's what, and to make him see what kind of lowest common denominator he's capitalizing on.
I needed a Judas, so I drugged you to say egg and made you an enemy.
Yeah, the anti-Semites are the Judas for Douglas Murray and his folk.
Of the people, the glue to hold my society together. For nothing so unites the ignorant mass.
Ignorant Tories.
Is like a common hatred.
Yep.
I still get the clock radio, right?
Yes, sir.
You want to know why I did this?
Made fun of you when you were kids, ridiculed, get your...
That's Greg Berger as Cornfred. It's why the show works. It's the voice work of Jason Alexander, Greg Berger as Cornfred, and then probably Tim Curry as King Chicken.
Revenge, who's laughing now? The whole schmear, right?
Oh, right.
Hang him high.
But Pappy.
Pappy nothing. You're a bad seed. You're power hungry, crazy as a loon. Plus your frozen yogurt's too damn expensive.
I was a co-class clown with one of my friends in any class where I would be with them before they divided us up. Well, mostly me. They didn't divide the rest of them up. They just divided me up in the last 2 years of high school.
A little tidbit here that I didn't think to get into. They mostly divided me up because by that point I was failing more classes than my peers, my friends. And so that's why they divided me up. It's only fair that I give the backdrop. It's not like they were out to get me specifically. But maybe that too. But yeah, I was especially divided because I just had to repeat. I had to repeat math and science.
The population bomb proven to be
this again, just one more.
False, and the Malthusians proven to be false. Like, that's not the problem with overpopulation. It's not about resources. It's about the standards being way too fucking high. Like, the more people you have, the more people who get into stuff like stand-up comedy are going to be better than you. Whereas if, like...
No, but then you also have more candidates for actual people who will be into you because you're going to have more in the way of consumers of stand-up comedy.
No. You people haven't heard of the Matthew effect. Yes, technically it's true. More candidates to do the thing equals more candidates for an audience of that thing, except that consolation prize is no consolation at all because of the Matthew effect. So just kind of had to throw that in.
Extremists are morally confused, but the worst of them are jihadists, and he says Hamas is a jihadist organization. That's what he says. Now wait until you hear the rest.
In my view, that's all we need to know about it.
2.
The question of how it got that
3.
way.
That's what it was. That's
1.
Don't look any deeper. Don't look any deeper.
2, 3, 4.
Is fundamentally uninteresting.
Ignoring the fact that the charter that he's sourcing, was done in the 80s?
You gotta be kidding
When
me.
was that initial charter?
You gotta be kidding me.
For Hamas?
88. You gotta be fucking shit. I knew this back in 2014. You also deserve
not
this treatment, Destiny. You do.
1988, and of having a Jewish population, defies Islam and the Muslims. Let the eyes of the cowards not fall asleep.
Now he's at regular speed. Now, this is exactly why you should never jog to him. He's not to be jogged to. You know, sometimes you jog to audio, sometimes maybe even podcasts when you're sick of books, but he is not to be jogged to.
Okay.
Look at that.
Kant finds itself have been
Okay, well, I was going to do a whole bit where I was going to
upset.
kind of keep going through the silence, but I guess it wasn't that. But it was a long silence. Lazy. God, this one is long. This one's even worse. 1.75. Inexcusably long pause. Don't
anyway, so
jog
that's the Hamas charter.
To him.
They do put out
known quantity.
But I mean, if Iran chills here, if we're at the, I feel like we're at basically the same place we were like 2 or 3 days ago. Is it not just them not wanting to show weakness? Aren't Middle Eastern countries traditionally super into that shit? I mean, historically, if Israel wants to live like it's like in the 1960s or 1970s, they can do it. It's just fucking retarded. I don't think the U.S. should help defend them. I don't think anything. I think that if Israel, like if attacks like these get you sucked into war, then your country should just be wiped off the face of the earth. And then people like Netanyahu can walk to God proudly and say, well, our country failed as an experiment because we wanted to do brinksmanship with Iran. It's just like it's the most retarded fucking shit in the world. Like the U.S. already told you to shut the fuck up and fuck off in the Iraq war. When Saddam was shooting Scud missiles into Israel, trying to bait them in, and they listened then, and they said, okay, well, we'll shut the f up and chill, because whatever deterrence capacity Israel thinks it has, like, that's a thing of the
You tell him, Destiny.
past. Like, now you have to play big boy diplomacy, and you got to figure your problems out.
You think Sammy's listening? I don't think Sammy's listening.
You got to work your shit out and just ask. Like, now you have to play big boy diplomacy, and you got to figure your problems out. You got to work your shit out and just shoot
golf club,
shooting missiles and pretending like you can, do like brinksmanship with every country around you, like you're back in the 1960s. Is retarded. I'd be like, I don't know. It's not simple. Like, it's that easy. This is just fucking stupid. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no more shrooms in that fridge. I can tell you that much. I like to hedge on a lot of stuff, but there's one thing I won't hedge on, is one thing I know as a factual matter. There's no more, there ain't no more shrooms in that fridge. But kind of disrupting my own trip here, thinking that I've got to say stuff for you lot. I don't have to say jack shit for you lot. I'm just gonna enjoy this one. Unlike the last one where I start recording stuff under shroom trips, like no, this stuff that shan't see the light of day, but not for you lot, God. But no, the nice cloudy, clear sky convergence here. Don't you think so? The world needs a lot of convergence in terms of beliefs, and the wronger sides need to figure out that they're wronger anyway. The wronger need to fess that they're wronger, i.e. the Tentifada folks need to figure out that they're maybe slightly wronger, but so the world can converge. But here's like we got the perfect kind of cloudiness, clear sky convergence. Nighty night, folks.